What if there was a robot mower that actually worked? A robot mower where you didn't have to babysit it while it went around your yard, or follow it around your yard to make sure it doesn't get stuck, or push it up a hill that it can't make it up. Well, the good news is, I think that mower exists. And for me, it's called the Mammotion Luba Mini AWD. I've been using this mower for about a month now, and I'm very impressed with the results. It's not perfect, certainly, and we will get to some of those criticisms. But as someone who's dealt with a lot of smart technology and automated robot stuff with vacuums and stuff inside, I was very skeptical and concerned, honestly, when it came to trying to find the right automatic robot mower for my yard. I was anticipating a very disappointing purchase, and honestly, I'm pleasantly surprised. Now let's talk about my decision process for landing on this mower. Let's talk about first about where I live. So I live in the state of Michigan in the United States. And even in our summers, we fluctuate basically between 4 to 5 different climates a day. We have cold nights, hot days, lots of rain, and even in the spring or the fall, we still need to mow, and it can get really, really cold and then really, really hot. Sometimes within 24 to 48 hours, fluctuating like 50 or 60 degrees. So I needed a mower that could handle the elements. It's going to be outside all the time. It needs to be able to handle that. I didn't want to have to worry about every time it rained, having to bring it in, or have to worry about going through the mud if there's water retained in the yard or something like that. I needed something that could stand up to Michigan weather. And everything I saw online in the official material from the Luba Mini AWD seemed like it would check that box. Although they do recommend that you bring it in during the winter months, which I probably would have done anyway. Now, obviously, the other factor when it comes to making a decision of the type of mower is your yard itself. What type of yard do you have? Now, where I live is pretty hilly. So right on the edge of my front yard, it slopes down into my neighbor's yard. And in our backyard, we have a pretty decent slope downwards right in the middle of the yard. And right at the bottom of that slope is where most of the water retains during rainy season and after it rains. So honestly, those hills and that muddy area is a problem for my tractor. I have a John Deere mower, and it doesn't like those hills, especially when I have to kind of like mow sideways, and I don't want to mow directly into my neighbor's yard. And especially with the muddy areas, if I choose to mow that, I'm going to end up leaving long mud streaks around my yard because it's a very heavy tractor. So I needed a robot mower that could handle the grade of hill that I have and could go through that muddy area and not leave tons of mud tracks, or I could at least control it and tell it, like, don't mow today. And again, from everything I saw online, it seemed like the Luba Mini checked that box. So let's talk about what you get when you purchase this mower. First of all, there's a few different types of mowers that you can select from. And really, when it comes to the Luba, the Mammotion Luba models, the type of model that you would get is dependent mostly on how big your yard is. So the bigger your yard, typically the more expensive Luba you would need. So if your yard is less than 0.4 acres, you can probably get away with the Luba Mini. If your yard is anything bigger than that, like half acre or more, you probably need to spring for the Luba, like the full Luba, the Luba 2, I think is the model they're on now. So I was able to go online, just Google how big is my yard, and with a few clicks on a map, I mapped out my yard, and it told me that I was just under the threshold of what the Luba Mini could handle. So I went for the Luba Mini. It handles up to 0.4 acres. So with that purchase, you get the mower itself, and then you also get a positioning beacon, which I think is essential in setting this apart from other automatic mowers, and we'll talk about that later. So what's the setup process like? Well, obviously you get the mower, take it out of the box, take the beacon out of the box, and then as you're powering things on and positioning it, honestly, the setup itself is pretty simple. You first need to pick a spot for your charging station and for your beacon. Mammotion recommends that you place both of these, the charging station and the beacon, in an area that has a clear view of the sky. And at first I was like, nah, that probably doesn't matter that much. They're probably just saying that because technically that's best practice, but it'll probably work anywhere. And well, it kind of does. So I first had the charging station right up against my house in my backyard. It was kind of tucked, not under, but next to our deck. And then I put the positioning beacon a little further out. We have some landscaping mulch area that I threw it out in there. It wasn't directly under a tree, but it was near a tree. So when I first had the mower and the beacon in these positions, it worked, kind of, but it would pretty consistently lose connection, and that was super frustrating. So I moved them around. I tried some different locations, tried one further up on the hill, tried having the beacon and the charging station closer together, further apart, tried all these different things. And again, according to Mammotion's instructions, they want both the beacon and the charging station to have a clear view of the sky all around them. And again, unless I put them in the middle of my yard, that just won't work. But eventually, I did find a spot on the side of my house where I could have the charging station a little bit away from my house and put the beacon a little out from the corner of my house. So it doesn't have a 360 clear view of the sky, but if I'm looking at a circle, it maybe has 280 degrees clear view of the sky. And ever since I put him in that spot, it has been perfect. I have not lost connection once. It has worked totally fine. So once you have a location set, you can begin the process of mapping out your yard. This process involves you downloading the app. So you have to download the Mammotion app and set up your mower within that app. It's a pretty simple process. During that process, it will probably also ask you to update the firmware. So make sure you set aside time to do that. And then you can get into the mapping process. Now, from what I know, there are 2 ways to map out your yard, and it will depend basically on whether or not your yard is fenced in or not. So if your yard is fenced in, or it has some sort of clear marked out boundary that even an AI robot can look at and see and understand, oh, this is the edge of the yard, then you can use Mammotion's AI app mapping thing. So this will just have the robot drive around the perimeter, at least the perimeter that it can identify, and it will map out your yard for you. Very convenient. But for those of you that are like me and you don't have a fully fenced in yard, you have the option of manually mapping out your yard. And just FYI, you will need to map out your yard anytime you move your beacon. So make sure that your beacon is set and located in a good, consistent place where it gets good signal and a good view of the sky. Because if you put your beacon in place and you map out your yard and you find out like, oh, I just want to move the beacon 6 inches, you will have to map out your yard again. Which it makes sense because the map is based on that beacon's location. So if you move the beacon 6 inches or 6 feet, then the map accordingly will think that it's 6 inches or 6 feet this way. So that also means that if you're in a location like I am, if you're in Michigan and you have to bring in your equipment every year, you will have to map out your yard every year when you bring your equipment back out in the spring. Now, I don't personally mind that because especially now that I've done it, it will take maybe 30 to 60 minutes to map out my yard again. And I only have to do that once a year rather than having to mow my yard at least once or twice a week through the spring, summer, and fall. So I can do an hour to map once a year, or I can take an hour or 2 once or twice a week for months at a time. So I think that's a fair trade. But anyway, back to manually mapping your yard. So basically, for this manual process, your phone turns into sort of an RC car controller, and you will drive your mower around the perimeter of your yard to show it, this is the edge before you hit my neighbor's yard, this is where the street is, this is where the driveway is. You'll go all the way around your yard, driving it right up to the edge of landscape edging, the whole thing. And then once you're done, you just hit save and your map is complete. So as I was mapping out my yard, I chose to split my yard into 3 different areas, and that will just depend for you on how you want to schedule things to be mowed. I split my front yard in 2, basically either side of the driveway, and then I have my backyard as one big area. But you can set that up however you would like. You can do more areas, you can do fewer areas, it just depends on your yard. And then the nice thing is once you're done mapping out your yard, you can go back and edit it. So I found myself doing this where the first time I mapped out my yard, I wasn't great at driving the robot, and so I've gone back now multiple times to straighten out lines or maybe get a little closer to the landscape edging and just kind of tighten things up a little bit. So all you have to do is go into the map, hit edit, drive around the perimeter, and it will just save that revision into your map, and then you're done. One other key piece of mapping out your area is what they call no-go areas. So these would be areas like for us in our backyard, we have a big playground area with mulch and everything in it. And obviously we don't want the mower driving into that. So we map that out. Again, you go into your map, you create a no-go zone, and then you drive it around the perimeter of that thing. And then it knows anything within that perimeter I stay away from. So you can do that for playground areas, gardening beds, whatever. Now, once you have your yard mapped, then you can start going into your mowing settings and setting those to your preferences. You can schedule how often you want it to mow and then set mowing preferences for each of those mowings. So for example, I have my front yard mowed twice a week, but my backyard grows really fast, so I have it mow that 3 times a week. And I really like having that flexibility. Obviously, you have the option to manually tell it go mow at this time. So if you find either you had to skip a previous mow, or maybe you have an event or people coming over or something where you need to have the lawn mowed and you want it to have a really fresh look, you can just go into the app and say, mow now, or run the task now, or whatever, and it will take care of that as soon as you tell it to. Now, beyond the scheduling, you also have the mower settings, which you can set to your personal preferences. You can tell the mower how fast or how slow you want it to move. The slower movement would ensure that all of the grass is very evenly cut. If it moves a little faster, it might miss some blades here and there. At least that's what they tell you. I have it mow at the just lower than the fastest setting of speed, and I I've never noticed it missing grass. So maybe it does and I'm missing it, but it doesn't affect me. And it's not like at the fastest setting, like it's this blazing RC car on your yard. Like even at its fastest setting, it moves pretty slow. So I think you'll be fine. Another setting is the blade height. So you can set how tall you want the grass to be cut. The version that I have cuts between 2 to 4 inches or somewhere around there. So I have mine just cutting at an even 3. So it always cuts at 3 inches, but you can set that to your preference. And again, my backyard grows really fast and it's pretty thick, and cutting at 3 inches, I initially had it cut at 2. And at either of those settings, it never had any issues. Next, you can tell the mower if you want it to mow in the same line pattern every time, or if you want it to randomize that. So I have mine set to randomize. So like on Monday, it might cut the lines this way, and then on Wednesday, it would cut the lines this way, and then on Friday, it would do diagonals. Like it will just randomize that every time. So I like that setting, but if you're the type of person that wants the same lines cut every single time, you can tell it to do that. And just as an FYI, this will cut very straight lines. So if you are someone that is very particular about not having like the robot vacuum thing where it just kind of bounces around and randomly gets stuff, this will not do that. This will cut very straight lines. And then a new firmware update actually brought a setting that I really like and appreciate, something that I think will save battery life and help it mow quicker, is that you can actually set the distance between the lines that it's cutting. So the default setting when it first came to me is that it obviously cuts with some overlap as it turns around and cuts the lines because it wants to make sure that it's not missing anything. Well, now there's a new setting where you can kind of expand or decrease that overlap. So for me, I decrease the overlap because for me, it's cutting all the grass. I'm not noticing that it's missing anything. And if it's doing less overlap, it's cutting less lines, which means it will save battery life and it will cut quicker. So this new setting ensures that it's still overlapping. It's still going to get everything, but you can set that preference for how thick or thin you want those lines to be cut. But speaking of battery life, it's pretty good. I think it could be improved. For each task that it does, it will need to recharge in the middle of that task, at least for me. The mower automatically returns to the charging station once it hits 15%, and it will stay at the charging station unless you tell it to leave. It will stay at the charging station until it hits 90%, and then it will go out and complete the task. And charging from 15 to 90% takes a few hours. So you just need to be aware that it takes a while. So for me, completing one task, like mowing my front yard or mowing my backyard, can take 5, 6, 7 hours sometimes. It'll mow for about 2 hours. It'll come back and charge for a few hours, and then it'll go back and mow for another hour or 2. So if you're someone on a time crunch, you just need to be aware that this is not something that you can send out to do a quick mow. Like if you have an event coming up and you forgot, or you have people coming over that was unexpected and you have like 30 minutes to go mow the lawn, you're out of luck. Like it's not going to do it that fast. This will take hours and hours to mow. And again, I don't have that big of a yard. I have less than half an acre, and it takes about 6 to 7 hours to complete a task. And that's either the front yard or the backyard. Now for me, that's fine because I have the mower on a schedule. I know the days that it's mowing. It's set to mow multiple times a week. I don't really care about my lawn being at the perfect height when people are over because I know it's already been mowed a few times this week. But I can see that aspect of how long it takes to complete a task maybe being frustrating for some people. So you just need to be aware this is not going to take an hour from the time that you push mow to the time that it comes back to the charging station and your lawn is magically complete. It's not that type of machine. So I do think a way of improving that for Mammotion would be a quality of life improvement where you can swap the batteries out. So for this, there is a battery that you can remove and swap in a new battery if the battery goes bad over time or something. But it's not something where in the middle of a task, you can take the battery out and put another one in, and then it would just complete the task from where it left off. If you take the battery out, it will shut down and it will think it's done because it's dead. And when it comes back on, it will not remember that it was 67% way through that task. It will just go back to the charging station. So while it's unnecessary for my setup, I do think that would be a nice quality of life improvement over time, is to be able to swap batteries out and continue the tasks. So that way, if you do want to be able to mow in 3 hours rather than 7 hours, you at least have the option of buying a battery and swapping it in. Now, I mentioned I live in Michigan and we get a nice variety of weather on a weekly and sometimes daily basis. So I installed this mower in the spring and we basically get downpours on a weekly and again, sometimes daily basis. And the mower itself has not had any issues with those storms. It does come installed with a rain sensor that can detect rain hitting the mower. So if it's in the middle of a task, it can sense the rain and it would just head back to the charging station. You can turn that setting off if you still want it to mow in the rain. It's not going to affect the mower. It just might make your grass really clumpy. But I think the main benefit of the weatherproofing for this mower is not in its sensitivity to the rain, but it's in its sensitivity into how I want to clean it. One of my biggest concerns in getting a mower like this was how to clean it. Am I going to have to sit outside and scrub it with a toothbrush and get into the nitty-gritty of all this stuff and be really careful and delicate? I don't want to have to worry about that. I want to spray it with a hose. And so the answer is yes. If you're like me and you just want to spray it down with a hose, you can do that. I hose this thing down every week or two. I just spray it down on the top. I flip it over on its sides. I spray the bottom. Sometimes there's some stubborn dirt or grass areas that I just kind of with my thumb move it off, spray it down, send it back to the charging station. Good as new. It takes a few minutes to do that every week. Totally fine with me. Also, in addition to keeping it clean, I did purchase the little garage accessory thing that you can have come with it. And my initial thought was like, oh, that will help keep it dry during the rain. It'll kind of keep it, it'll preserve it longer during those stormy times. And honestly, obviously it helps with those things. But the biggest benefit for me is it keeps it clean from bird poop. We, for some reason, have birds that love to hang out on the edge of our roof and they hang out on our deck. And the mower is close enough to those things that this little garage accessory has preserved it from the pigeons' target practice multiple times. But back to flipping this over for cleaning, the nice thing about the mower in terms of safety is that it does come with sensors that if you lift it, it will stop operating. So if it's in the middle of a task and you're like me and you have young kids that might be a little curious, even though they've been told, don't play with the robot, they might get curious. And if they do lift it, the task immediately stops and it will send a notification to your phone saying that the lift sensors have been triggered. It also has obstacle detection with the front bumper and the camera in front of it. So if you have, again, young kids or small dogs like I do that just kind of roam around the yard, it will detect them. And if they're in the line of the path, it will just circle around them. It does also come with a little 4G chip in it so that if someone wants to steal your robot mower, you can actually track the location with that 4G chip. It comes with 1 year of free service for that kind of 4G tracking positioning system. And then if you want to continue after that, I think it's like $50 or $60 a year. But as I said earlier in the review, the robot is not perfect. I think the beacon and the charging station is really finicky. And I had to, in the moment, kind of adapt to a better placement that was better for the equipment rather than my optimal placement of where it would fit best in my yard. Now, thankfully, I was able to find a setup that still works well. I'm still able to kind of keep it tucked away from the main traffic areas of the yard, but it's still kind of tucked away so that you can't see it from the front yard. But I can definitely see that being a point of frustration for people when they're excited, they're getting it set up, they've already got places picked out, and then you put them in those places, you get them set up, you get the power cables plugged in, and it doesn't work. That could be really frustrating. That's obviously annoying. Again, I think the battery life could be better. I also think it'd be nice to either upgrade to like a dual battery option or, again, have the ability to swap out those batteries mid-task and have it be able to pick up where it left off. And also the app is kind of your standard smart technology app. I'm used to that. I've spent a lot of time in smart technology apps. It's just like the rest of them. So if you're used to those apps, you will find your way around it and it'll be fine. And if you're not used to those apps, it will probably be kind of annoying. But again, I've used these apps for everything like smart lights, vacuums, thermostats. They all suck, but maybe that's just me. But honestly, in terms of complaints, at least so far, that's kind of it. I think there are things that I can nitpick, and certainly over time, it'd be good for some of those things to be addressed by the manufacturer. But overall, after a month of not having to mow my own lawn and bag grass and deal with mower maintenance with my tractor and getting it in and out of the shed and all these different things, I'm super pleased with the Mammotion Luba Mini. And I look forward to a summer of clean lines, perfectly mowed grass, and a lot of time spent with my kids